You know, peyote and brick stitch are awesome, but sometimes I get tired of that regimented look and I want something more organic. So I designed this pattern. It looks like rippling waves on the ocean, and it is much easier to do than it looks. Hey there, Sandy here. Want to be inspired and grow in your creativity? You've come to the right place. For ultimate wave effect, we are building this design on quad bow beads from Potomac beads, but you could put these ruffles on all sorts of things, including other beading, fabrics. Stay tuned till the end for 7 different ways to use this pattern that you might not have thought of. So these are called quad bow beads. You can see why they're called that, because they have 4 holes, the quad, and the shape is the bow. And you'll find these at Potomac beads. But if you don't have these, you can do this stitching on just about anything. I just like that having them in here, and here's the back side so you can see them more clearly, just adds to the rippling wave effect. So the number of quad bows that you start with will determine the length of your project. For this bracelet, which turns out to be about 6 1/4 inches long, 7 1/4 with a clasp, I used 11. I'm just going to make a little sample for you here using 3, but I'll show you different ways you can use it in all sorts of lengths. I've got a size 11 beading needle here, but you don't need a particularly small one. It could be a 10 or an 11 with about 5 feet of thread on here. You can add thread. You just want to start with a comfortable length. And you're going to need to choose several additional seed beads to make your ruffles. I'm going to flip this over because you can see it a little better on the back side. The first one you want to choose is a bead that will go around all of your quad bows, and that's an 11-0, and I've chosen this pearl color. Then you'll want 2 colors of 15-0s. In this case, I have a bronze, that's the next one, and then a gold. Then you'll want 2 more 11-0s for your next 2 rows, and we'll finish off with some 8-0s in the final row. I've got my pearl 11-0s here on my beading mat. Here's a tip for you if you're ever working with beads that have multiple holes. Just take a second and stick your needle through all the holes. This will save you heartache later on, especially on a project that maybe you don't come around to one of the other holes till much later, and then you find it's clogged and it's heartbreaking. And if you're only using a few beads in a project, then I would suggest just check them all from the beginning. And that way you can proceed with confidence and no tears. So there, okay, those are all good. We also want a stop bead, and this is just a bead that is not going to be included in the project, but it helps keep things tight as we're working, and then we can remove it later. And I would recommend you make it a very different color than, make it a very different color than what you are using in your project. I'm going to leave maybe an 8 or 10 inch end here because I may add findings. And the way you add a stop bead is you just go through it once and then you go back through it again from the same direction that you first went through, and it just holds, but you can slide it up and down the thread as you want. So now we're going to start by going into one end hole of your quad bow. It doesn't matter where, just pick one end, slide that down. Then you're going to add 2 11-0s and go into the next hole on the same side. And this is where that stop bead comes into play because you can pull and that holds everything in place. And we're going to continue adding 2 beads and going into the next hole on the same side. It's actually really simple. And 2 beads. Now when you get to the other side, you're going to attach another quad bow. And once again, you're going to add 2 beads to bridge to the next one. And since we're doing a wavy pattern, just lay it out for a moment. So we've got this one facing this way with the arc facing up. So this one we want the arc facing down,
And we'll go into the next hole on the same side that these beads, the little bridge is coming out. Now a caution for you, don't pull this too tight. I did here. See how that's like wanting to jump up over that one? I pulled these just a little bit too tight. So just normal, even tension is fine. This will work for what I want it to do, but it is a little on the snug side. So let that be a lesson to you. And then carry on, adding 2 beads and going into the next hole on the same side. So at this point you could see it kind of loosened up. That's okay. I'm just going to tug it, but not too hard. Two beads into the next hole and carry on until you have added as many quad bows as you want the length of your piece to be. Here I have my 3 quad bows all done with the 2 beads in between every hole. Now I need to go around the corner, and for that you're going to add 5 beads. There. And simply go into the next hole on the other side. And those 5 beads should perfectly go around the corner. Now we're going to repeat what we just did, adding 2 beads, going into the next hole on the same side. And you'll see what that does is it fills in all of those gaps. And they may look a little loose on the convex side and a little tight on the concave side, but it will all work out smoothly in the end. And exactly the same when you're bridging between 2 of the quad bows, just add 2 beads. I experimented with this. I tested it quite a bit. It looked to me like I would need more, but when it was all said and done, 2 was just perfect here. 2 on either side will work out beautifully. So carry on until you get to the other end. Adding my last set of 2 beads, and you'll see that I'm back at my stop bead, and there's just one more thing to do to finish this set of beads, and that's to add 5 on this end to go around the corner. And if you have to nudge that stop bead out of the way, then go ahead. There we go. Now you can go back through all of these beads, and this will line them all up beautifully, and it will just look like this lovely row of beads all around your quad bows. And this is the foundation that we are going to build our ripples on. So if you don't want to use, or you don't have this kind of bead, anything that has a foundation of seed beads you could build on. If you're doing bead weaving, bead embroidery, whether it's on for jewelry or on garments, then you can add these ruffles to it. Keep in mind, if you're doing bead embroidery on fabrics or garments, that glass beads are heavy. You wouldn't think a little tiny seed bead is heavy, but you start adding a lot of them, they will add a lot of weight to your garment. They may change the way it hangs, pull it out of shape. And I can see some of these ruffles being really cute sewn onto a purse, or maybe just like the pocket of a blouse. And again, don't pull these too tight. Oops, now I missed a bead there, so I'm going to go unthread and go back and catch all of them and just go all the way around, and they will be lined up beautifully. I've traced back through all of my 11 rows, and you can see how much more tidy and lined up they are. And I'm just going to come out on the end to start adding my ruffles. So since I started over here, I'm just going to make my way, rather than going all the way down one side again, I'll just skip over here. And you want to come out the center of 5 beads on an end. So we'll just work our way up here. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, or 5 beads on the end. So I want to come out the middle one. I've got my first color of 15-0s here, and you want to add 3. Skip the next 11-0 and then go through the one after that. And that makes just a little picot. And repeat all the way around. So I came out through that one, skip this one, go through the next one. And repeat that until you come back to where you started. So I've gone all the way around and I'm back to the beginning with my last 3 15-0s, and I'm going to go into that first 11-0 I came out of and then step up through the first 2 beads of that first picot. Now if these look a little messy and all over the place, good! That's your ruffles and ripples or waves or whatever you want to call them starting. Now at this point you have a choice to make. You can go all the way around like this, or you can finish your ends like this. It's entirely up to you. So at this point I will be moving on to this next one, but it's how you go around the ends that determines what look you get. If you want to have this kind of a finish, then every time you get to this side and you get to the very last row, you'll just go through all these, and I'll show you that. But now it's time to move on to the next color of 15-0s. So you'll pick up 3 beads as before, and then go through the center bead in the next picot. And repeat all the way around. It's that simple. Three beads, and through the center. I've got my second row of 15-0s done on one side, and on this end I'll show you how to finish it without going around the corner so that you have more of this look. I just think this works out well for a bracelet where you're going to put a clasp, but it can do different things too. It's just a different look. For this, all you're going to do is go through the remaining picot beads on the corner. So this third one, so we went through this middle one, so there's 1, 2, 3. We're going to go through this third one. Always, every time. Get off. And then I'm going to go through this 11-0, just following that thread path around the corner is all I'm doing here. Then through all 3 of these picot on the end. Back through the 11-0. And then it's kind of like a step up where I'm going to go through these first 2 beads of that picot on the other side. And now I will carry on adding 3 and going through the center bead of the next picot. Now the only problem with this is that you can get a buildup of thread in here, If you go around a lot more than I did, you may not be able to fit into the 15-0s, and you might have to switch to like a size 12 needle. If you want your ruffles to go around the end of your piece, you'll have to do some increases here and get a little creative. So I'm going to add my 3 beads. But if I were just to go over to this one, and if I were to keep doing that as I go around and the rows get bigger, this would end up cupping up. So you need to add more beads. So what I can do here is, instead of going over to this one, this middle bead in the next picot, I'm going to go into the next bead in the same picot. And then I'll add 3 more beads and go into the first bead in the next picot. And you can adjust this, so the more you add into this space, naturally the more ruffled your final piece will be. So I'm going to add 3 more and go into the middle bead of this picot here. So I've added 2 additional picots in that space to make my little ruffles go around the curve of the end. I'm going to go here, I'm going to step up, maybe. Now you'll notice that the 2 ends are going to be a little bit different just because of the number of beads that we have. So you'll just have to use your judgment. So now we can carry on. I've just stepped up, and now I'm going to add my first color of 11-0s for the ruffle. These were the 11-0s that went around. These created the base, but now the 11-0s for the ruffle. And just as in the previous row, I'm going to go into the middle bead of the next picot. Hello. Oh my gosh, get out of there. And go all the way around. And on this end, I'll just go straight across. So here I've come back around. For what I am doing here, the number of increases that I did in the second row of 15-0s is sufficient. If you decide to take this further and maybe you want to make wider and wider ripples, you might have to add more increases at some point. But like I said, for now, for what I'm doing and the width I'm making, which will end up being about this wide, the increases that I did were just right. So I've got my last 3 of the 11-0s. And again, I'm going to step up by going through the first 2 beads in the next picot, the first picot that I added in this color. Now I'm going to bring in my second color of 11-0s for the ruffle, and also some 8-0s. And I deliberately chose colors that are pretty similar because these are going to go in the same row. This is going to be the final row. If you take a look at this piece, I did the same thing here. This final row has an 11-0, 8-0, 11-0 for the picot. And they're similar colors, so it reads as one unit, although that bigger one, it kind of gives a nice sparkle like the tops of waves. And we're going to do the same thing, except, like I said, 11-0, 8-0, 11-0, and then into the center bead of the next picot, and carry on going around. While I'm doing this, I have to take a minute to let you know how wonderful my patrons are. Not only does their financial support mean I can continue making YouTube videos, but they are constantly encouraging me and my creativity. They lift me up on down days and generally help keep me going. So if you are a patron, you are awesome. Thank you, thank you. And if you're not, well, consider joining us for up to 2 bonus tutorials every month, plus the good feeling of supporting this channel and knowing you are keeping these videos free for everyone. And if you wanted wider ruffles than I am making here, like I said, this is my last row, you could definitely make this row with 3 11-ohs, and then make the next row or a couple of rows with 8-ohs, go on to 6s. Really any beads, experiment, 2 and 3 millimeter beads. The principle is just that we're increasing rows, and as the rows increase, the sizes of the beads increase. So here are the pieces I made with this technique. I love these organic ripples that we get with seed beads. I left this part of the clasp off the bracelet just to remind you that if you're making jewelry and adding findings, it's a good idea to knot off all of your seed beading thread, then come in with a new piece of thread to attach your findings, because sometimes these wear off. Now, I did make sure to have seed beads going through the loop here, so that should help keep this metal piece from rubbing on the thread, but sometimes it can't be helped. And if you've tied on a new piece of thread to attach your finding, if it ever does come off and you need to replace it, you can just cut off the old one and not worry about your whole piece falling apart. Now, I promised you 7 ways you might not have thought of to use this technique. Of course, the obvious one that was on the cover is to make a bracelet. And isn't that pretty? I can't wait to wear it. But here's another idea. What about using just a piece for a bracelet? Maybe just a portion like this, and then adding in some beads. So you could just make a little sample. Also, this would be a really cute pendant all by itself. Just add a jump ring or whatever findings you want, and it's a pendant. Make it as long as you want. Number 3 idea is to use 2 pieces, whatever length you want them to be, and use them as the either side of a pendant. So you can just add jump rings, drill holes, or add bails or whatever to your piece. And isn't that just a beautiful way to accent and highlight a piece? In whatever length you want, these could be earrings. That's idea number 4. My 5th idea is if you just fold this in half, add a jump ring going through both points, your cording can go through here, and you have a bail. That would be an amazing accent for a piece. Also, I just love the look of this by itself. Add a pinback finding and make it into a brooch. Add some dangles coming down. And then finally, make a nice long one and use it as a purse handle or a handle for any little bag. Now that you've seen this beading pattern, you will want to check out the other seed bead projects in the bead weaving playlist that I put together for you. You can find that in the upper right. Don't forget to look in the description box below for links to the tools and materials I used in this video. Happy creating!